everyone, this is Zachary, Director of the Saginaw Basin Land Conservancy, and welcome to the next edition of our little stuck-at-home video series that we're calling Socially Distant Science and Adventure. Today's episode is, I think it's going to be a popular one, and it has a lot of appeal to a lot of different people. So this is Trevor giving us, this is the third video that he's done from his backyard, but this one is all about his methods for gardening, backyard gardening. Backyard gardening is a very, very popular pastime here, all around the country, obviously, but you know, just take a look at our garden centers and how well they're doing and how busy they are most of the time. And you can see that backyard gardening is something that is extremely popular around the community. So Trevor has kind of a miracle garden in his backyard, and he's going to give us a little tour of it. He's going to talk about his tips, tricks, and techniques. He's going to talk about the things that he likes to grow, where he gets his supplies, and we're all going to learn a little bit more about backyard gardening. Maura and I and Leo do not have a backyard garden here at our house on McKinley, but I think that we are going to maybe put one in, inspired by Mr. Edmonds and his techniques there. So at any rate, enjoy this video, and I hope that you're considering putting in a backyard garden of your own. There's a tremendous amount of benefits in growing healthy, fresh food right in your own backyard. You don't have to worry about where it came from. You don't have to worry about those question marks over, you know, how it was grown or what chemicals might be on it. You'll know exactly how this thing was grown because you grew it yourself. And just like anything else that you DIY, you know, cutting open a tomato and putting it on a sandwich, a tomato that you grew yourself, and then eating it while you're, you know, sitting on your backyard porch overlooking your own beautiful garden is a pretty cool and rewarding feeling, so I am told by Mr. Edmonds. So I'm looking forward to trying it ourselves, and thanks a lot to Trevor and everybody else for contributing to this, and enjoy. All right, backyard gardening. Take care. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Trevor Edmonds, the SPLC's Director of Land Protection. Thank you for tuning in today, and I hope you're doing well. Today, I would like to talk about something that's of great interest to me, and that is backyard gardening. Now, this is something I hear different people, friends, family sometimes talk about wanting to get into, and it's actually not as hard as it might seem initially, but this is a good time of year to start thinking about it with spring officially upon us, and with the temperatures warming up, it's a good time of year to really start considering if you want to get into this hobby and to start planning. One of the first things you can really start to do in terms of how you go about getting into backyard gardening is kind of looking at what you have in terms of available space. You know, what parts of your yard would be eligible for doing this, and on top of that, thinking what kinds of things do you want to grow. Considering these two things is very important in terms of how much space you're going to need, and just basically the overall setup of how you're going to lay out your garden. So let's say you just have, you know, like you can see behind me here, I have a pretty small backyard, but that doesn't mean that I can't set up a space where I can grow a wide variety of different vegetables, which I've been doing over the last number of years that I've been living here in the south end of Bay City. So really considering that, and then also thinking about, yeah, the types of vegetables you want to grow. Like, what sorts of things are you realistically going to use for cooking, you know, in your kitchen, things like that. What types of things you like to eat. That's really going to kind of help you back into a list of different things that would, you know, realistically that you'd be able to grow. And thinking about how much sunlight you get in your yard, things like that, because certain plants like tomatoes really like sun. So making sure you don't have too much shade is a good thing. Another thing that you're really going to have to consider too is if we kind of spin around here, when I first started doing backyard gardening, actually this first setup right here, this is actually what you'd call a raised bed. It's just an 8x8 bed, and as you can see, I just used some lumber. These are 2x10s that I used to frame it in with some 4x4 posts in the corner to just help box it in. And then I actually had soil that I trucked in and filled this in with. So I knew it was from a home and garden center, actually right from Buds and Blooms, right in Bay County, actually really close up to the Tuscola County line out on M25 is where I got the soil to fill this. And when I first started, I grew a whole variety of things in here, peppers, tomatoes. I think I tried carrots as well in the first year. And this worked out pretty well. It gets a fair amount of direct sunlight, but as you can see, if we pan over to this other part of the yard, I kind of outgrew that little space and decided to really expand. And right now it's not looking in the best shape. You can still see a lot of the dead growth from last fall that's overwintered, but in the other video in the series I talked about spring guard cleanup, we're going to leave a lot of this material in place and the leaves on the ground until our average daytime temperatures get at least about 50 degrees consistently, so that we can keep some of this material in place for pollinator species and other beneficial insects. So it's not looking the best right now, but you can really kind of see the bones of the layout here. But really kind of figuring out your square footage of space and prepping, you know, the garden plot. In the case of the raised bed, you're able to build in a boxed area, and you can actually put the soil right on top of existing turf grass. The amount of soil that you put in to fill the box is going to adequately, tamp down any growth of the turf grass. You can do that. But in the case of these beds over here, where I actually built the garden right into the existing turf, I rented a rototiller from a local tool rental place. Most communities will have those around. It's a very easy thing to find. Or if you have a friend or family member that might just let you borrow a rototiller for a couple hours. If not, and you really want to do it old school, you can use a shovel and just kind of scoot your way along and turn the soil that way. That's another method. But basically getting down to where you have bare open soil conditions to plant things into. So kind of once you do that, in terms of the amount of space you have and what type of vegetables you want to plant, there are recommendations depending on if you start the vegetable plants from the live plant itself or from seed, in terms of the adequate amount of spacing you need between plants. So you're really going to want to consider that in terms of your garden layout. And then another thing that I've really started using over the last year or so, I wish I would have done it sooner, is using some type of material for weed blocking around your plants. Ideally, it's really nice to actually put something like this down. Now this is just like a black visqueen, but there are a number of options. Actually, this year I kind of want to move to something more organic based. There's actually like some corn based fabrics that you can get that do the same thing. And it's really nice because you can lay that right down right at the start of planting season and then cut or burn holes into it and plant directly through it, so that you only have openings in the material for your desired vegetable plants to come up through, and then you block all growth of other undesired weed species. Because that's honestly, once you prep the garden itself and get your plants in, aside from just making sure that the plants are watered and tended to as they're growing and growing through the cages and things like that, weeding is a big thing. So doing things to cut down on the amount of weeding you have to do is definitely a good thing to consider in terms of your garden layouts. The other thing is just there's a pretty simple list of tools that are good to have on hand. A conventional shovel, like some type of a hoe implement like this for doing weeding or breaking up soil is a good tool to have. And even just something like a small hand rake or garden trowel for planting and cleaning up vegetation or weeds around your plants is good. So it doesn't take a lot. Depending on how in depth you want to get with some of the structures in the garden for like some trellis type constructions for different beans and other plants that grow and do better that way, you can really get creative in terms of the materials you use to build those structures. And then there are certain plants too, like especially tomatoes and other things, where using these simple wire cages are really helpful when they grow up and they start to branch out, and these structures really help support those plants, especially when they start to produce the tomatoes and different things that get heavier and really stress some of the plants themselves as they're growing. So a lot of this stuff is really readily available. You can get a lot of it online. I like Johnny's Seed is a great supplier for seed and all sorts of other garden implements. But then there are a lot of great places right at hand. Begix, Bay Farm Services in Bay City, and even places like Home Depot carry a lot of basic equipment and supplies for getting started in gardening. There's other things too. We talked about in one of the other videos in this series the idea of composting, which, as you can see, Back in the garden here, we have our compost tumbler, which this is probably getting to be a pretty familiar layout with some of the different videos we've done in this series. But there's always different things you can explore in terms of augmenting your garden setup, and having a compost setup within your garden is a great way to continue adding valuable organic material back into the soil for fertilizer for your plants. I never personally had it done because the soil here was growing things adequately enough. But if you are experiencing, issues with plant growth in the soil, or if you're just curious about the content of your soil, you can get soil testing done. Reaching out to your local Michigan State University Extension office is a great resource in terms of getting soil tests done. So if you're curious about that and want to learn more about ways to amend your soil for growing certain types of plants, that's a good resource to check out. But yeah, it's a really good thing to do in terms of growing your own food, especially if you like to cook and just want to try out different things, especially produce that you might not be able to find readily. There's a lot of different things you can try out that way if you do your own gardening. But if anyone has any questions about this, or how to get started in it, feel free to reach out to me at Trevor, Trevor, at sblc-mi.org, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. So thanks again.